The neighbor of a young woman had never dated a woman, and everyone found it strange, until they finally discovered the reason. Click subscribe to learn more exciting stories like this and avoid 10 years of bad luck in love. The afternoon sun filtered through the curtains of Emily Thompson's apartment, illuminating her living room with a warm golden glow. At 32, Emily had managed to establish a quiet and orderly life in the suburbs of Chicago. Her work as a freelance graphic designer allowed her to spend most of her time at home, enjoying the peace and familiarity of her surroundings. The building where she lived, a 5-story apartment block with a red brick facade, was like a small community in itself. Emily knew all her neighbors, from old Mrs. Johnson in 2B, who always had freshly baked cookies, to the Garcia couple in 4A with their noisy but adorable twins. That Friday afternoon, Emily was sitting on her couch working on her laptop when she heard a commotion in the hallway. Curious, she approached the door and looked through the peephole. What she saw instantly intrigued her. A young man, who didn't seem to be more than 25 years old, was struggling to maneuver a large cardboard box up the stairs. His dark, messy hair fell over his eyes, and his face showed a mixture of frustration and determination. Emily couldn't help but notice how attractive he was, with his angular features and athletic body. Without thinking twice, she opened the door. "Need any help?" she asked, surprising the young man. He looked at her, his green eyes shining with a mixture of surprise and something Emily couldn't identify, nervousness perhaps. I'm fine, thanks," he replied, his voice soft and slightly shaky. Emily insisted, "Come on, that box looks heavy. Let me give you a hand." After a moment of hesitation, the young man nodded, allowing Emily to take one end of the box. Together, they managed to carry it up to apartment 5C, right next to Emily's. "Thanks," mumbled the young man, avoiding eye contact. I'm Nathan, I just moved in." "Nice to meet you, Nathan. I'm Emily, your neighbor from 5B, she replied with a warm smile. "Welcome to the building." Nathan nodded but didn't say anything else. He seemed anxious to end the conversation. "Well, if you need anything, don't hesitate to knock on my door," Emily offered, intrigued by her new neighbor's reserved attitude. "Thanks," Nathan repeated, before quickly closing the door. Emily stood staring at the closed door for a moment, her mind full of questions. Who was this mysterious young man? Why did he seem so nervous? And most importantly, why did she feel so inexplicably attracted to him? As she returned to her apartment, Emily couldn't help but feel that something in her quiet and orderly life was about to change. What she didn't know was how much. The following days brought a wave of rumors and speculation in the building. The new tenant in 5C had become everyone's favorite topic of conversation. "He hardly ever leaves his apartment," Mrs. Johnson commented during one of her visits to Emily. "And when he does, it seems like he's running away from something. I saw him in the elevator the other day," Mr. Garcia added. "I tried to start a conversation, but he barely responded with monosyllables. There's something weird about that guy, I'm telling you." Emily listened to these comments with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. While it was true that Nathan seemed to avoid contact with the other tenants, she couldn't help but think there was more to his story. One afternoon, as she was returning from grocery shopping, Emily ran into Nathan in the hallway. He was struggling with his keys, trying to open the door to his apartment while holding a bag of takeout food. "Hi, Nathan," Emily greeted with a smile. "How's it going?" Nathan startled, almost dropping his keys. "Oh, hi, Emily, I'm fine, thanks." Emily noticed that his gaze nervously shifted, avoiding direct eye contact. "Are you sure? You seem a bit stressed." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that Emily was beginning to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. "It's just work, lots of work." "What do you do, if you don't mind me asking?" "I'm a programmer," he replied after a pause that seemed too long. "I work from home." "Oh, that explains why we don't see you much around here," Emily said, trying to keep the conversation going. "I work from home too. If you ever need a break or want to chat, my door is always open." Nathan nodded, but his expression was one of contained panic. "Thanks. I'll keep that in mind," he mumbled, before finally managing to open his door and disappear into his apartment. Emily stood staring at the closed door, her mind working at full speed. There was something about Nathan that didn't add up. His nervousness seemed to go beyond simple shyness. What secrets was this mysterious young man hiding? As she entered her own apartment, Emily made a decision. She was going to find out what was going on with Nathan. Not just out of curiosity, but because something about him awakened a protective instinct in her that she couldn't ignore. What Emily didn't know was that her decision was going to trigger a series of events that would change her, life forever. The mystery of Nathan was just the beginning of a story that was going to test everything she thought she knew about herself and about love. The days turned into weeks, and Emily's curiosity about her enigmatic neighbor only grew. Nathan remained a mystery to everyone in the building, but Emily was determined to break down that barrier. One afternoon, as Emily was working on her laptop, she heard a dull thud coming from Nathan's apartment, followed by a muffled curse. Without thinking twice, she got up and headed to her neighbor's door. She knocked softly. "Nathan, is everything okay?" There was a moment of silence before the door opened slightly. Nathan appeared, his face a mixture of surprise and embarrassment. "Emily, yes, everything's fine," he mumbled, but Emily could see past him a broken lamp on the floor. "Are you sure? Looks like you had a little accident," she said, pointing to the remains of the lamp. Nathan followed her gaze and sighed. "Yeah, I was trying to change a light bulb, and well, I'm a mess with these things." Emily saw her opportunity. "Want me to lend a hand? I'm pretty good with home repairs." Nathan hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded and opened the door wider. "If it's not too much trouble," Emily entered, discreetly observing the apartment. It was surprisingly tidy, with few pieces of furniture and minimal decoration. An open laptop on the dining table confirmed his claim of being a programmer. As Emily busied herself cleaning up the remains of the lamp and helping Nathan install a new one, she kept up a light conversation, trying to make him feel comfortable. "So, do you like living here?" she asked casually. Nathan, who was holding the ladder for her, nodded. "It's quiet. I like that. Yeah, it's a good place," Emily agreed. "Although it can be a bit lonely sometimes, don't you think?" She saw Nathan tense slightly. "I guess, but I'm used to being alone." Emily came down from the ladder, having finished installing the new lamp. "Well, you don't have to be alone all the time. We all need a little company now and then." Their eyes met for a moment, and Emily could see a mixture of emotions in Nathan's gaze: gratitude, nervousness, and something else, longing perhaps. "Thanks," Nathan finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "For the help and for being kind." Emily smiled. "No problem. That's what neighbors are for, right?" When Emily returned to her apartment that night, she felt as if she had won a small battle. She had managed to break through, if only a little, the barrier that Nathan had built around himself. The following days brought more opportunities for these small encounters. Emily made sure to coincidentally run into Nathan in the hallway or in the elevator more frequently. Each time, she tried to maintain a conversation, however brief. One morning, she ran into Nathan in the building's lobby. He looked frustrated, frowning at the bulletin board. "Everything okay?" Emily asked, approaching Nathan startled slightly, but this time he didn't avoid her gaze. It's silly. I was looking for a laundry service nearby. My washing machine broke down and—" "Oh, you can use mine if you want," Emily offered without thinking. "It's in perfect condition and I hardly ever use it." Nathan looked at her, surprised by the offer. I wouldn't want to impose." "It's no imposition," Emily insisted with a smile. "In fact, why don't you come over this afternoon? I can show you how it works, and we could have a coffee. While we're at it, I have a new coffee maker that makes amazing espresso." She saw Nathan struggle internally. For a moment, she thought he was going to reject the offer, but finally, to her surprise, he nodded. "Okay," he said softly. "Thank you, Emily." As Nathan went up the stairs, Emily couldn't help but feel a wave of excitement. She had managed to take another step in her mission to unravel the mystery of her neighbor. What Emily didn't know was that this simple act of kindness was going to be the catalyst for a series of events that would change her life, and Nathan's forever. The game of power she thought she was playing was about to become much more complicated than she could have ever imagined. That afternoon, as she prepared her apartment for Nathan's visit, Emily found herself more nervous than she had expected. Why did she care so much about impressing this man she barely knew? She told herself it was simple curiosity, the desire to solve a puzzle. But deep down she knew there was something more. The doorbell rang at 5 o'clock. Sharp. Nathan was punctual, at least. When Emily opened the door, she found a visibly nervous Nathan, holding a basket of dirty laundry as if it were a shield. "Come in," Emily said with a reassuring smile. "The washing machine is this way." As she showed him how the washing machine worked, Emily noticed that Nathan seemed to be struggling to maintain his composure. His hands trembled slightly as he loaded the clothes, and he avoided looking her directly in the eyes. "Are you okay?" Emily asked softly. "You seem a bit tense." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, that gesture that Emily already recognized as a sign of his discomfort. I'm not very used to this." "To using a washing machine?" Emily joked, trying to lighten. The mood Nathan let out a nervous laugh. "No, to this," he made a vague gesture with his hand, "interacting with people." Emily felt a pang of compassion. "Hey, it's okay. There's no pressure here. We're just two neighbors having coffee while the laundry gets done. Nothing more." She saw Nathan visibly relax at her words. "Thank you," he murmured. "You're very kind." As the washing machine began its cycle, Emily guided Nathan towards the kitchen. "Now, about that coffee I promised you." The next hour passed surprisingly quickly. As Nathan relaxed, Emily discovered that he was quite an interesting conversationalist when he felt comfortable. They talked about their jobs, their hobbies, and even their dreams for the future. "I've always wanted to travel," Nathan confessed, his eyes shining with an emotion Emily hadn't seen before. "There are so many places I'd like to see." "And what's stopping you?" Emily asked, genuinely curious. The shadow that crossed Nathan's face was so quick that Emily almost missed it. "It's complicated," he mumbled. "My work, my responsibilities." Emily felt she had touched a sensitive topic and decided to change the conversation. "Well, you can always start with short trips. There are many beautiful places near the city." The rest of the afternoon passed in a more relaxed atmosphere. When the washing machine finished its cycle, Emily helped Nathan fold his clothes, laughing at his evident discomfort when they got to his socks and underwear. "Thank you for everything," Nathan said when he was about to leave. "For the washing machine, the coffee, and the company." Emily smiled. "Anytime, it's been nice." For a moment, it seemed like Nathan wanted to say something more. He opened his mouth, closed it, and finally just nodded before going out the door. That night, as Emily prepared for bed, she couldn't help but think about Nathan. She had seen a side of him that no one else in the building seemed to know. Behind his facade of mystery and shyness, there was an intelligent, funny, and surprisingly vulnerable young man. The following days brought more opportunities for these small encounters. Emily made sure to coincidentally run into Nathan in the hallway or in the elevator more frequently. Each time she tried to maintain a conversation, however brief. One morning she ran into Nathan in the elevator. She noticed he was carrying a bag of takeout food. "Chinese food again?" Emily teased. "Don't you know how to cook?" Nathan blushed slightly. "The truth is, I never learned." Emily saw another opportunity. "Well, if you want, I can teach you some basic dishes. It's easier than it seems." Nathan looked at her, surprised by the offer. I wouldn't want to bother you." "It's no bother," Emily insisted. "In fact, why don't we start now? I have everything we need to make a delicious pasta." She saw the doubt in Nathan's eyes, but also a glimmer of something else. Hope? Anticipation? "Okay," he finally said. "I'd love to learn." The next few hours were a whirlwind of laughter, small culinary disasters, and to Emily's surprise, moments of unexpected tension. Every time their hands brushed as they passed ingredients, every time she got close to show him how to cut vegetables correctly, Emily felt a spark of electricity between them. At the end of the night, sitting in front of a plate of pasta that had miraculously turned out edible, Emily found herself studying Nathan's face. There was a softness to his features that she hadn't noticed before, a vulnerability that attracted her in a way she couldn't explain. "Thank you for this," Nathan said, breaking the silence. "Not just for the cooking lesson, but for everything, for being kind to me when no one else was." Emily felt a lump in her throat. "You don't have to. Thank me, I enjoy spending time with you." Their gazes met, and for a moment, Emily thought Nathan was going to say something more. But the moment passed, and soon he was saying goodbye, promising that next time he would cook for her. That night, as Emily lay in her bed, her mind was spinning. What was happening? What had started as a game, an attempt to unravel the mystery of her neighbor, was turning into something more, something that scared and excited her in equal parts. What Emily didn't know was that Nathan was having similar thoughts in his own apartment. The wall he had built around himself for so long was beginning to crack, and he wasn't sure if he should repair it or let it fall completely. As the days passed, Emily and Nathan began to spend more and more time together. What started as occasional cooking lessons turned into regular dinners, movie marathons, and long conversations that extended into the early hours of the morning. Emily discovered that Nathan had a dry, sarcastic sense of humor that came out when he felt comfortable. He, in turn, marveled at Emily's ability to see the best in people, even in someone as closed off as him. However, despite their growing closeness, Emily felt that Nathan was still keeping secrets. There were moments when he would suddenly close off, changing the subject when the conversation got too close to his past or his family. And although he no longer avoided physical contact as before, he still visibly tensed when Emily touched him unexpectedly. One night, as they were watching a movie on Emily's couch, she decided to take a risk. Slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal, she rested her head on Nathan's shoulder. She felt him tense immediately, his body rigid as a board. For a moment, Emily feared she had made a mistake, but then gradually, Nathan began to relax. And to her surprise, she felt his arm timidly wrap around her. Emily held her breath, her heart beating so hard she was sure Nathan could hear it, but she didn't move, afraid of breaking the spell. They remained like that for the rest of the movie, neither of them really paying attention to the screen. When the credits began to roll, Emily lifted her head to look at Nathan. Their eyes met, and Emily saw in them a mixture of emotions that she couldn't fully decipher. Fear, desire, confusion, hope, all mixed in those green eyes. That had intrigued her from the first day. "Nathan," she whispered, not really knowing what she was going to say. He looked at her, his eyes moving between hers and her lips. For a moment, Emily thought he was going to kiss her. Her heart raced at the possibility. But then, as if he had been jolted by an electric current, Nathan abruptly stood up. I have to go," he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. "Thanks for the movie. Good night." And before Emily could say anything, he had gone out the door, leaving her confused and with a feeling of loss that she couldn't explain. That night, as she tossed and turned in her bed unable to sleep, Emily realized that what had begun as a game had turned into something much more dangerous. She was falling in love with Nathan, and she had no idea how to handle that. What she didn't know was that on the other side of the wall, Nathan was having a similar crisis. The wall he had built around himself for so long was crumbling, and he didn't know if he had the strength to rebuild it or if he really wanted to. The days following the movie incident were tense. Nathan seemed to be avoiding Emily, and the few times they met in the hallway, their interactions were brief and uncomfortable. Emily felt frustrated and confused. Just when she thought they were making progress, Nathan was closing himself off again. But this time, she wasn't willing to let him go so easily. One afternoon, she decided to take the bull by the horns. She planted herself in front of Nathan's door and knocked determinedly. Several minutes passed before the door opened. Nathan appeared, with messy hair and dark circles under his eyes as if he hadn't slept well in days. "Emily," he said, surprised. It's not a good time." "Nathan, we need to talk," Emily insisted, putting her foot in the door to prevent him from closing it. "You can't keep avoiding me." She saw the struggle in Nathan's eyes, but finally, with a sigh of defeat, he opened the door wider to let her in. The apartment was dark, With the curtains drawn, Emily noticed piles of books and papers scattered everywhere, as if Nathan had been working frantically on something. "What's going on, Nathan?" Emily asked softly. "I thought we were getting closer, and suddenly it's like you've built a wall between us again." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, that nervous gesture that Emily knew so well. "It's complicated, Emily. I can't explain it." "Try," she insisted. "Whatever it is, we can face it together." She saw Nathan struggle internally, as if he was about to reveal a long-kept secret. Finally, with a deep sigh, he spoke. "I'm not who you think I am." "Emily, sus," he said quietly. "All of this my work, my life here, it's a lie." Emily felt the ground move beneath her feet. "What do you mean?" Nathan collapsed onto the sofa, burying his head in his hands. "My real name is Daniel Carter. I was a financial analyst at a large corporation. I discovered some irregularities, suspicious transactions that pointed to a big money laundering scheme." Emily sat down next to him, her mind spinning with this new information. "Is that why you moved here? Are you running away?" Nathan Daniel nodded. "I gathered all the evidence I could and handed it over to the authorities. But before they could act, someone leaked that I was the informant. I received threats." Emily. "Serious threats. The witness protection program gave me a new identity and moved me here." Emily was speechless for a moment, trying to process everything. Suddenly, many things started to make sense. His nervous behavior, his reluctance to talk about his past, his isolation. "Why are you telling me this now?" she finally asked Daniel. Looked up, his eyes meeting Emily's. "Because I'm falling in love with you," he confessed in a whisper. "And I can't drag you into this mess. It's not fair to you." Emily's heart skipped a beat at this confession. Despite the gravity of the situation, she couldn't help but feel a wave of joy, knowing that her feelings were reciprocated. "Daniel," she said softly, taking his hand, "I don't care about your past. I care about you, the person I've come to know these past months. And if being with you means facing some dangers, then so be it." Daniel looked at her with a mixture of amazement and gratitude. "Emily, you don't know what you're saying. These people are dangerous. If they find out where I am, then we'll face it together," Emily interrupted firmly. "I'm not going to leave you alone in this, Daniel, not now that I've finally found you." And before Daniel could protest further, Emily leaned in and kissed him. It was a soft, tender kiss, full of promises and hopes for the future. When they separated, she saw that Daniel's eyes were shining with unshed tears. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not running away, for staying." Emily smiled, caressing his cheek. "Always," she promised. That night marked a before and after in their relationship. From that moment on, there were no more secrets between them. Daniel told her everything about his past, about the evidence he had gathered, about his fears and hopes for the future. Together, they began to plan their next move. They knew they couldn't hide forever, but they also couldn't allow the criminals Daniel had exposed to get away with it. What they didn't know was that their decision to face this challenge together was going to test their relationship in ways they had never imagined. The danger was closer than they thought, and soon they would find themselves in a race against time to protect not only their love, but also their lives. The weeks following Daniel's revelation were a whirlwind of emotions and activity. Emily and Daniel spent every free moment together, strengthening their relationship while working on a plan to face the situation. Daniel had kept encrypted copies of all the evidence he had collected about the money laundering scheme. Together with Emily, he began to organize and analyze the information, looking for any details he might have overlooked earlier. "Look at this," Daniel said one night, pointing to a series of transactions on his laptop. "These transfers are repeated. Every month, always in slightly different amounts, but following a pattern." Emily leaned over his shoulder, studying the screen. "Do you think it's some kind of code?" Daniel nodded. "It could be. If we could decipher it, it might give us the key to unmasking the ringleaders of the operation." They worked tirelessly, using Emily's graphic design skills to create data visualizations that could reveal hidden patterns. Little by little, they began to form a clearer picture of the criminal network that Daniel had discovered. However, as they progressed in their investigation, a sense of unease began to grow in both of them. Daniel noticed a couple of times an unfamiliar car parked in front of the building, and Emily swore someone was following her on her way to the supermarket. "Maybe we're just being paranoid," Emily said one afternoon as she closed the curtains of her apartment. For the umpteenth time, Daniel looked at her with concern. "We can't take any risks if they've discovered where I am." He didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew what was at stake. They decided it was time to contact the Witness Protection Program again. Daniel called his contact, an agent named Martinez, and informed him about their suspicions and the new discoveries they had made. "Stay alert," Martinez warned them. "I'll send a team to reinforce your security, but it might take a couple of days to arrive. In the meantime, don't do anything that might draw attention." That night, Daniel stayed in Emily's apartment. Neither of them wanted to be alone, and the closeness provided a small comfort in the face of the growing threat. They were cuddled on the couch, half asleep after a long night of work, when a noise startled them. It was a dull thud, as if someone had stumbled in the hallway. Daniel jumped up, gesturing to Emily to keep quiet. He approached the door stealthily and looked through the peephole. What he saw made his blood run cold. Two men dressed in black were in the hallway, one of them working on the lock of Daniel's apartment. "They've found us," he whispered, turning to Emily with panic in his eyes. Emily felt fear invade her, but she forced herself to stay calm. "What do we do?" "We have to get out of here," Daniel said, quickly moving to collect his laptop and important documents. "There's a fire escape at the back of the building if we can get there without them seeing us." Emily nodded, quickly grabbing her purse and a coat. With her heart pounding frantically, she followed Daniel towards the kitchen window that led to the fire escape. Just as Daniel was opening the window, they heard the sound of a door being violently opened. The men had entered Daniel's apartment. "Quick," Daniel whispered, helping Emily out the window. The cold night air hit them as they hurried down the metal stairs, trying to make as little noise as possible. Emily could hear the beats of her own heart echoing in her ears. When they reached the alley behind the building, Daniel took Emily's hand and they began to run. They had no plan, just the instinct to get as far away from danger as possible. They ran through dark and deserted streets. Every shadow seemed a threat, every sound a potential pursuer. After what seemed like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, they stopped in a deserted park, gasping for air. "Do you think we've lost them?" Emily asked. Nervously looking around, Daniel shook his head. "We can't be sure. We have to keep moving." But before they could decide where to go, a car appeared at the entrance of the park, its headlights illuminating them like a spotlight. "Run!" Daniel shouted, grabbing Emily's hand once again. They plunged into the thickness of the park, branches and bushes scratching their faces and arms as they ran desperately. They could hear voices and footsteps behind them getting closer and closer. Just when they thought they couldn't run anymore, they saw the lights of a main avenue ahead. If they could get there, maybe they could lose themselves among the people, take a taxi, escape. But when they were about to leave the park, Emily tripped over a protruding root. She fell to the ground with a muffled cry, her ankle twisting at an unnatural angle. Daniel stopped, torn between the need to keep running and the desire not to leave Emily behind. "Go!" Emily shouted, the pain evident in her voice. "Save yourself!" But Daniel didn't move. Instead, he knelt beside her, their eyes meeting in the dim light. "I'm not going to leave you," he said firmly. "We're in this together, remember?" And as the footsteps of their pursuers approached, Daniel helped Emily to her feet, passing his arm around her waist to support her. Together, limping and exhausted, they came out onto the lit avenue, not knowing if they were heading towards salvation or towards an even greater danger. What they did know was that, whatever happened, they would face it together. The bustle of the main avenue was like a shock to Emily and Daniel after the silent tension of their escape through the park. The neon lights of the nightclubs and the noise of the night traffic created a surreal contrast with the danger they had just faced. Daniel looked frantically around, searching for an exit, a refuge, anything that could keep them safe. Emily was leaning heavily on him, her face contorted with pain from her injured ankle. "There," Emily said suddenly, nodding her head. "That internet cafe we could use, a computer to contact someone." Daniel nodded, guiding her as quickly as they could move towards the shabby-looking establishment. A bell tinkled as they entered, attracting the bored gaze of the employee behind the counter. "1 hour, please," Daniel said, trying to keep calm as he helped Emily sit down in front of one of the computers in the farthest corner. As soon as they were settled, Daniel began typing frantically. "I'm going to send an encrypted email to Martinez," he muttered. "Hopefully he can send us help soon." Emily nodded, keeping an eye on the door. Every time the bell rang, she felt her heart stop for a moment. After what seemed like an eternity, Daniel leaned back in his chair. "It's done," he said. "Now we can only wait." But the wait turned out to be short. Barely 10 minutes later, the door of the cafe burst open. Emily and Daniel tensed, preparing for the worst. However, to their surprise, who entered was not any of their pursuers, but a middle-aged woman in an impeccable business suit. "Daniel Carter?" she asked quietly, approaching their table. Daniel nodded cautiously. "Who are you?" The woman pulled out an identification. "Special Agent Sarah Reeves, FBI Agent Martinez, contacted me. Come with me, quickly." Emily and Daniel exchanged a glance. They had no choice but to trust this stranger. With Agent Reeves's help, they managed to leave the cafe and get into an unmarked car waiting on the street. As they drove away, Emily saw in the rearview mirror 2 suspicious-looking men entering the internet cafe. They had escaped by a hair's breadth. "I'll take you to a safe place, Agent E," Reeves said as she drove. "There we can talk more calmly and take care of that ankle." An hour later, Emily and Daniel found themselves in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. Emily's ankle had been bandaged, and she was now resting with an ice pack. "All right," said Agent Reeves, sitting in front of them. "I need you to tell me everything that's happened since Daniel entered the witness protection program." For the next few hours, Daniel and Emily recounted their entire story, from their first encounter in the building to their escape that night. Agent Reeves listened attentively, taking notes and asking occasional questions. "You've done an impressive job with the investigation," she finally said. "The information you've gathered could be the key to dismantling the entire money laundering operation." "So you believe us?" Emily asked, hope clear in her voice. Agent Reeves nodded. "Not only do I believe you, but I'm going to help you. But you have to understand that this is going to be dangerous. The men behind this operation are powerful and will stop at nothing." Daniel took Emily's hand, squeezing it gently. "We're prepared for anything," he said with determination. "We've come too far to give up now." Emily nodded in agreement. "What's the next step?" Agent Reeves smiled, a glimmer of admiration in her eyes. "The next step is to set a trap. We're going to use the information you have to lure the ringleaders of the operation and catch them red-handed." As Agent Reeves began to explain her plan, Emily and Daniel exchanged a look. They knew they were embarking on something dangerous, something that could change their lives forever. But they also knew that whatever happened, they would face it together. What they didn't know was that Agent Reeves's plan was going to test their relationship in a way they had never imagined, and that before it was all over, they would have to make decisions that would put not only their lives at stake, but also their love. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Under Agent Reeves's guidance, Emily and Daniel worked tirelessly to prepare the trap that they hoped would put an end to the money laundering network. The plan was bold. They would use the information Daniel had collected to create a fake investment opportunity that would attract the ringleaders of the operation. Agent Reeves would pose as a potential investor, while Daniel, with his inside knowledge of the operation, would act as an intermediary. Emily, for her part, would use her graphic design skills to create convincing documents and presentations that would give credibility to the operation. "Remember," Agent Reeves warned them during one of their planning sessions, "these men are dangerous and cunning. One single mistake could ruin everything. Daniel nodded, his face serious. We understand we're not going to fail. As they worked, the relationship between Emily and Daniel deepened even further. Sharing the danger and excitement of their mission had united them in a way that neither of them had experienced before. One night, as they were reviewing the final details of the plan, Daniel took Emily's hand. "You know, I never thought I'd find someone like you," he said softly. "Someone who would accept me with all my secrets and fears." Emily smiled, intertwining her fingers with his. "And I never thought I'd fall in love with my mysterious neighbor," she joked. "I guess life has surprising ways of bringing people together." They looked into each other's eyes, and for a moment, all the danger and uncertainty surrounding them seemed to vanish. They kissed, a kiss full of promises and hopes for the future, but the reality of their situation was quick to remind them of what was at stake. The day of the operation was rapidly approaching, and with it, the possibility of putting an end to their nightmare or losing everything. The morning of the big day dawned grey and rainy, as if the weather reflected the tension they felt. Emily and Daniel prepared in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. "Are you ready?" Daniel finally asked, as he adjusted his tie in front of the mirror. Emily nodded, although she felt a knot in her stomach. "As ready as I can be," she replied, forcing a smile. "And you?" Daniel looked at her through the reflection in the mirror, his eyes full of a mixture of determination and fear. "Honestly, I'm terrified," he admitted, "but I know that with you by my side, we can do this." They hugged tightly, seeking comfort and strength in each other's arms before, heading out to the meeting place. Agent Reeves was waiting for them at an elegant hotel in downtown Chicago. Dressed in a designer suit and expensive jewelry, she looked every bit the part of a wealthy investor. "Remember," she told them in a low voice as they walked towards the conference room, "no matter what happens, stay calm. We have undercover agents throughout the hotel ready to act at my signal." Daniel and Emily nodded, their hearts pounding as they entered the room. The men waiting for them were exactly as Daniel had described: expensive suits, luxury watches, and a coldness in their eyes that spoke of years of illicit activities. "Mr. Carter," said one of them, a burly man with a well-trimmed mustache. "Or should I say Mr. Nathan?" It's been a while since our last encounter. Daniel felt his blood run cold, but he kept his composure. "Mr. Hawkins," he replied with a nod. "Thank you for seeing us." The meeting began, and Emily watched in amazement as Daniel and Agent Reeves played their roles to perfection. They talked about investments and returns, offshore accounts and tax havens, as if they were discussing the weather. But as the conversation progressed, Emily noticed something strange. One of the men, a thin guy with glasses, kept staring at her. At first she thought it was paranoia, but then she saw him whisper something to Hawkins. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the room changed. Hawkins smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Carter," he said slowly, "why don't you tell us about your charming companion?" Daniel hesitated for a second, and Emily knew they were in trouble. "She is Emily Thompson," Hawkins interrupted, "freelance graphic designer, your neighbor in the building where you've been hiding these past months. Am I wrong?" The silence that followed was deafening. Emily felt the world stop around her. How did they know who she was? "I see we've underestimated you," said Agent Reeves, her voice cold and controlled. "But you've underestimated us too." At that moment, the doors of the room burst open, and a team of armed agents entered, shouting orders. Everything happened in a matter of seconds. Hawkins and his men tried to flee but were quickly subdued. Daniel grabbed Emily and pushed her to the ground, shielding her with his body. When the chaos finally calmed down, Emily raised her head to find Daniel's worried gaze. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice shaky. Emily nodded, unable to speak. The relief that it was all over mixed, with the shock of how close they had been to disaster. Agent Reeves approached them, a triumphant smile on her face. "We did it," she said. "Thanks to you, we've captured the leaders of one of the largest money laundering operations in the country." But the joy of victory was short-lived, As the agents were taking away the detainees, Hawkins passed by Daniel and Emily. "This isn't over," he hissed. "We have friends in high places. You won't be safe anywhere." Daniel squeezed Emily's hand, feeling her tremble. They knew Hawkins wasn't bluffing. Despite his capture, the danger was far from over. "What do we do now?" Emily asked, looking at Agent Reeves. The agent sighed. "Now comes the hard part. We need to put you both in witness protection." Daniel and Emily looked at each other, the realization hitting them like a hammer. They had won the battle, but the cost could be leaving. Behind everything they knew, "Will we be able to stay together?" Daniel asked, his voice barely a whisper. Agent Reeves looked at them sympathetically. "We'll do everything we can," she promised. "But I can't guarantee anything. Security is our top priority." As they left the hotel, escorted by agents, Emily and Daniel walked in silence, their hands intertwined. They had risked everything for truth and justice, but now they faced an uncertain future. The only thing they knew for certain was that, no matter what came, their love would have to be strong enough to overcome any obstacle. The days following the operation passed in a blur of interrogations, paperwork, and preparations. Emily and Daniel barely had time to process everything that had happened before they were informed that they had to leave. "It's for your own safety," Agent Reeves explained as she handed them their new identities. "Until the trial is over and we can be sure that all those involved have been captured, you need to disappear." Emily looked at the passport in her hands. "Olivia Parker," it said. A stranger stared back from the photo, with hair dyed a different color and contact lenses that changed her eye color. Daniel, now known as Ethan Summers, seemed equally disconcerted by his new appearance. He had grown a beard, and his hair was shorter and darker. "Where are we going?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. Agent Reeves handed them an envelope. "Here are all the details. Memorize them, and then destroy the document. No one but you should know your destination." Daniel opened the envelope with trembling hands. His eyes widened in surprise as he read the contents. "Oregon," he said, looking at Emily. She felt a mixture of excitement and fear. Oregon, a new state, a new life. It was both exciting and terrifying at the same time. "You'll leave tomorrow at dawn," said Agent Reeves. "An agent will accompany you until you're settled in your new home." That night, in the hotel room where they were staying under protection, Emily and Daniel embraced in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. "Do you think we'll ever be able to come back?" Emily finally asked, her voice muffled against Daniel's chest. He sighed, stroking her hair. "I don't know, love, but as long as we're together, we can face anything." The next morning, with the sun barely peeking over the horizon, Emily and Daniel boarded a plane bound for Portland. As they took off, Emily looked out the window, watching as the city that had been her home all her life grew smaller and smaller. "It's strange," she said softly. "Part of me is terrified, but another part is excited. It's like we're starting from scratch." Daniel took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "We are," he said with a soft smile. "And there's no one I'd rather start from scratch with than you." The flight was long and exhausting. When they finally landed in Portland, both were tired but anxious to see their new home. The agent accompanying them, a quiet man named Rodriguez, led them through the airport and then to a waiting car. After an hour's drive, they arrived at a small town on the outskirts of Portland. The houses with their wooden facades and the tree-lined streets looked like something out of a postcard. "Welcome to Astoria," Rodriguez said, as they stopped in front of a two-story house with a small porch. "This will be your home for now." Emily and Daniel entered the house, marveling at its rustic charm. It was small but cozy, with wooden floors and exposed beams on the ceiling. "It's beautiful," Emily whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Daniel hugged her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "It is," he agreed, "and it's ours." Rodriguez gave them a quick tour of the house and explained the details of their new life. They would have jobs waiting for them, Emily as an art teacher at a local school and Daniel as a programmer at a small technology company. "Remember," Rodriguez warned them before leaving, "you must keep a low profile. No social media, no contact with people from your previous life. Your safety depends on it." When they were finally alone, Emily and Daniel sat on the small sofa in the living room, overwhelmed by everything that had happened. "It's like a dream," Emily said, looking around, "or a nightmare, depending on how you look at it." Daniel took her hand. "I know it's not easy," he said softly. "We left our whole life behind, but it's also an opportunity. We can be whoever we want to be here." Emily looked at him, a small smile forming on her lips. "Who do you want us to be?" Daniel smiled, pulling her closer to him. "I want us to be happy," he said simply. "I want us to build a life together, without secrets, without fears. I want to wake up every morning and see your face, knowing that we're safe and together." Emily felt her heart swell with love. Despite everything they had been through, despite all the changes and dangers, they had each other. "I love you," she whispered, leaning in to kiss him. "And I love you," Daniel replied against her lips. That night, as they lay in their new bed, in their new house, in their new life, Emily and Daniel talked until the early hours of the morning. They talked about their fears and hopes, their dreams for the future. And although they knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, that there would always be the fear that their past would catch up with them, they also knew that together they could face anything. As the sun began to peek over the horizon, tinting the sky pink and gold, Emily and Daniel finally fell asleep, their bodies intertwined, their hearts beating in unison. It was the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, a chapter full of challenges, but also of love, hope, and the promise of a future together. 2 years had passed since Emily and Daniel, now known as Olivia and Ethan, had arrived in Astoria. Little by little, they had built a new life in the picturesque Oregon town. Emily had fallen in love with her job as an art teacher. Seeing her students' faces light up when they created something beautiful gave her a satisfaction she had never experienced in her previous career. Daniel, for his part, had found a new purpose in his work as a programmer. He was using his skills to develop educational software, something that made him feel he was contributing positively to society. Their relationship had flourished in their new environment, free from the secrets and dangers that had marked the beginning of their love story. They had developed a deeper and more authentic connection. One Sunday afternoon, as they strolled along the boardwalk overlooking the Columbia River, Daniel stopped in front of a statue of Lewis and Clark that adorned the riverfront park. "You know, sometimes I feel like Lewis and Clark," he said, a smile playing on his lips. Emily arched an eyebrow, amused. "Exploring uncharted territory?" Daniel laughed softly. "Something like that. But I'm more referring to how they saw the world, how they transformed the ordinary into extraordinary, with the power of their imagination and their heart." He turned to Emily, taking her hands in his. "You do that for me, you know. You transform my world, make it brighter, more beautiful." Emily felt her heart race. There was something in Daniel's gaze, an intensity she hadn't seen before. "Emily," he said softly, using her real name for the first time in a long time. "I know our life hasn't been easy. We've faced dangers that most people can't even imagine. We've had to leave behind everything we knew, but through all of that, the one thing that has kept me sane, the one thing that has given me strength to keep going, has been you." And then, to Emily's surprise and delight, Daniel knelt in front of her, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "I can't promise you a normal life," he continued, his voice trembling slightly with emotion. "I can't promise you that. Our past won't catch up with us someday. But what I can promise you is that I'll love you every day of my life, that I'll face any challenge by your side, that I'll build a future with you, whatever name we use, or wherever we live." He opened the box, revealing a delicate gold ring with a small diamond. "Emily Thompson, would you do me the extraordinary honor of marrying me?" Emily felt tears fill her eyes. For a moment, all the noise of the boardwalk seemed to fade away, and there were only the two of them. "Yes," she whispered, her voice broken with emotion. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Daniel stood up, sliding the ring onto her finger with trembling hands before pulling her in for a passionate kiss. Around them, Passers-by applauded and cheered, moved by the romantic scene they had just witnessed that night as they celebrated their engagement with a bottle of Oregon wine on the porch of their house. Emily couldn't stop looking at the ring on her finger. "It's perfect," she said softly. "But Daniel, how? I mean, we're supposed to keep a low profile." Daniel smiled, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Let's say I had a little help. Remember our neighbor, Mrs. Anderson?" Emily nodded. Mrs. Anderson was an adorable old lady who lived in the house next door and had taken them in as if they were her own grandchildren from the day they arrived. "Well, it turns out her grandson is a jeweler in Portland," Daniel explained. "She helped me get the ring, discreetly. She even helped me choose it." Emily felt a wave of affection for their neighbor. "We'll have to thank her," she said with a smile. "Oh, I already did," Daniel laughed. "I promised her she'd be the matron of honor at our wedding." Emily joined in his laughter, feeling happier and freer than she had in years. The following months passed in a whirlwind of wedding plans and dreams for the future. They decided to have a small, intimate ceremony, just with the close friends they had made in Astoria. The wedding day dawned clear and sunny. Emily looked at herself in the mirror, barely recognizing herself in the beautiful white dress. Her hair, which had returned to its natural color, was arranged in an elegant updo adorned with fresh flowers. There was a soft knock on the door, and Mrs. Anderson entered, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "Oh, my dear," said the old lady, taking Emily's hands. "You look beautiful." Emily smiled, feeling a lump in her throat. "Thank you, Mrs. Anderson, for everything." The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity, in the garden of their house, surrounded by the scent of roses and the sound of nearby church bells. Emily and Daniel exchanged vows and rings. "I, Daniel, take you, Emily, as my wife," Daniel said, his voice firm and full of love. "I promise to love and respect you, in sickness and in health, in wealth and in poverty, in our good days and in our not-so-good ones. I promise to be your partner, your confidant, your best friend. And I promise that no matter what the future holds for us, we'll face every challenge together, as a team." Emily, with tears in her eyes, repeated similar vows, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. When the officiant declared them husband and wife and Daniel kissed her, Emily felt as if everything in her life had led to this moment. All the dangers, all the secrets, all the difficulties, everything had been worth it, for this moment of pure happiness. The reception was a joyful celebration full of music, dancing and laughter. As Emily and Daniel shared their first dance as husband and wife, she couldn't help but marvel at how her life had changed. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked softly. Noticing her distant gaze, Emily smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "About how all this began. About that day when I first saw you in the hallway of the building, struggling with that moving box." Daniel laughed. "Ah, yes, I was so nervous that day, not just because of the move and the whole witness protection thing, but because I saw the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen and had no idea how to talk to her." Emily lifted her head, looking at him, in surprise. "Really? You never told me that?" Daniel shrugged, a slight blush tinging his cheeks. "Well, I had to maintain my air of mystery, didn't I?" They both laughed, continuing their dance in comfortable silence. Later that night, when the party finally ended and they were alone, Emily and Daniel sat on their porch looking at the stars. "You know, despite everything we've been through, I wouldn't change anything," Emily said softly, "because everything led us to this moment." Daniel pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "I wouldn't change anything either. Every moment, every challenge has made us stronger, both individually and as a couple." They remained silent for a moment, enjoying the peace of the night and the warmth of each other's presence. "Do you think we'll ever be able to go back?" Emily finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. Daniel sighed. "I don't know. Love. Maybe someday, when everything is over and it's safe. But even if we can't, it's okay. We've built a life here. We have friends, we have a home, and most importantly, we have each other." Emily nodded, intertwining her fingers with Daniel's. "You're right. Home is wherever we're together." As the sky began to lighten with the first rays of dawn, Emily and Daniel remained embraced, contemplating the future that stretched out before them. A future that, although uncertain, they were ready to face together. And so, in a small Oregon town, far from where they had started but exactly where they needed to be, Emily and Daniel closed one chapter of their life and began a new one. Their story, which had begun with mystery and danger, now continued with love, hope, and the promise of a shared future, because in the end they discovered that the greatest mystery of all was how two people, against all odds, could find each other and create something beautiful together. And that was a mystery they were happy to spend the rest of their lives exploring. As the years passed, Emily and Daniel settled into their new life in Astoria. Their small house by the Columbia River became a true home, filled with laughter, love, and the mundane joys of everyday life. They found comfort in the routines they established together: morning jogs along the riverfront, weekend trips to the local farmers market, quiet evenings spent reading on their porch swing. Emily's art classes at the local high school became increasingly popular, and she found herself rediscovering her passion for painting. She started hosting community art workshops on weekends, bringing together people of all ages to explore their creativity. Daniel, meanwhile, had become an integral part of the software company he worked for, developing educational programs that were being adopted by schools across the state. Their circle of friends grew, and they became active members of the Astoria community. They volunteered at local events, joined a book club, and even started a small garden in their backyard. To their neighbors and friends, they were simply Olivia and Ethan Summers, a loving couple who had moved to Astoria for a quieter life. But beneath the surface of their seemingly idyllic life, the weight of their past never fully disappeared. There were nights when Daniel would wake up in a cold sweat, haunted by nightmares of their narrow escape. Emily would sometimes catch herself scanning crowds for familiar faces, her heart racing at the sight of a black sedan parked on their street. They maintained regular contact with Agent Reeves, who kept them updated on the progress of the case against the money laundering ring. The trial had been long and complex, with numerous delays and appeals, but slowly, surely, justice was being served. 3 years after their wedding, on a crisp autumn morning, Emily discovered she was pregnant. The news brought both joy and fear. They had talked about having children, but the reality of bringing a new life into their complicated world was daunting. "What if they find us?" Emily whispered one night, her hand resting on her growing belly. "What if we're putting our child in danger just by existing?" Daniel pulled her close, his hand covering hers. "We can't live our lives in fear," he said softly. "This child is a symbol of our love, of the life we've built together. We'll protect them, just like we've protected each other." As Emily's due date approached, they took extra precautions. Agent Reeves arranged for a security detail to be nearby, disguised as new neighbors. They chose a hospital an hour away for the delivery, using their witness protection identities for all the paperwork. On a warm summer night, their daughter was born. They named her Hope, a testament to the feeling that had carried them through their darkest times. As Emily held their newborn daughter, with Daniel's arms around them both, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. "She's perfect," Daniel whispered, tears in his eyes. "She's our new beginning." The first few months of parenthood were a whirlwind of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and overwhelming love. Emily took a year off from teaching to stay home with Hope, while Daniel worked from home as much as possible. Their little family cocoon felt safe and secure, but their peace was shattered one autumn afternoon, just as Hope was learning to crawl. Daniel received an urgent call from Agent Reeves. "We've had a security breach," she said, her voice tense. "One of the convicted members of the ring has escaped custody. We have reason to believe he might be looking for you." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. In a matter of hours, Emily and Daniel found themselves packing essential items, strapping Hope into her car seat, and following a new set of agents to yet another safe house. As they drove through the night, leaving behind the life they had so carefully built, Emily felt a mixture of fear and determination. She looked at Daniel, who was holding Hope's tiny hand as their daughter slept, oblivious to the turmoil around her. "We'll get through this," Emily said. her voice stronger than she felt. "We always do." Daniel nodded, his jaw set with resolve. "For Hope," he said, "we'll do whatever it takes to keep her safe." Their new safe house was a small cabin in the mountains of Colorado. It was remote and isolated, a far cry from the community they had grown to love in Astoria. The first few weeks were tough as they adjusted to their new surroundings and the constant presence of security personnel. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, they found a new rhythm. Emily homeschooled Hope and returned to her art. Finding solace in painting the majestic mountain landscapes, Daniel continued his work remotely, developing new software that could be used in disaster relief efforts. It was during this time of isolation that Emily and Daniel's relationship was tested like never before. The stress of their situation, coupled with the challenges of raising a toddler in confinement, led to arguments and tension. There were moments when the weight of their past seemed too heavy to bear, when the life they had left behind in Astoria felt like a distant dream. But through it all, their love for each other and for Hope kept them going. They learned to communicate better, to lean on each other in times of stress, and to find joy in the small moments. Hope's first words, her wobbly steps, the way her laughter echoed through the mountain air. As Hope's second birthday approached, they received news that changed everything. The escaped convict had been recaptured, and the last of the appeals in the money laundering case had been exhausted. The danger, it seemed, had finally passed. Agent Reeves visited them personally to deliver the news. "You're free," she said, a rare smile on her face. "You can go back to your lives, your real identities. It's over." The words took a moment to sink in. Emily and Daniel looked at each other, then at Hope, who was happily playing with her toys, unaware of the monumental shift occurring in her parents' lives. "We can go home?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. Agent Reeves nodded. "If that's what you want, or you can start fresh somewhere else. The choice is yours now." That night, after Hope was asleep, Emily and Daniel sat on the porch of their mountain cabin, looking at the stars that seemed close enough to touch. "What do we do now?" Emily asked, her head resting on Daniel's shoulder. Daniel was quiet for a moment, his arm around her. "I don't know," he admitted. "Part of me wants to go back to Astoria, to the life we built there. But another part wants to start completely fresh," Emily finished for him. She understood the feeling all too well. They talked long into the night, weighing their options, discussing their dreams for the future. By the time the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, they had made their decision. They would go back, not to Chicago or Astoria, but to Emily's small hometown in upstate New York. It was a place where Emily had roots, where they could be close to her family, and where Hope could grow up with a sense of stability and heritage. The process of reclaiming their identities and explaining their long absence to family and friends was challenging. There were tears, hugs, and countless questions, but there was also forgiveness, understanding, and an outpouring of love that overwhelmed Emily and Daniel. They bought a charming old farmhouse on the outskirts of town, with plenty of room for Hope to run and play. Emily opened a small art gallery in town, showcasing her own work, as well as that of local artists. Daniel continued his software development work, but also started teaching computer science classes at the local community college. As they settled into their new life, Emily and Daniel found that the experiences they had been through had changed them in profound ways. They were more appreciative of the simple joys of life, more resilient in the face of challenges, and more committed than ever to each other and to their family. Hope grew into a curious, adventurous child, with her mother's creativity and her father's analytical mind. As she got older, Emily and Daniel knew they would eventually have to tell her about their past, about the circumstances that had brought them together and shaped their family. But for now they focused on giving her the happy, stable childhood they had fought so hard to provide. One evening, as they watched Hope playing in the backyard, chasing fireflies in the fading light, Daniel turned to Emily. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked softly. "Everything we went through?" Emily thought for a moment, then shook her head. "No," she said firmly. It was difficult and scary, and at times I thought we wouldn't make it. But it led us here to this moment to hope. How could I regret that? Daniel smiled, pulling her close. You know, when I first moved into that apartment building in Chicago, I was so lost, so alone, I never imagined I'd find not just love, but a family, a home. Emily leaned into him, watching as Hope ran towards them, her little hands cupped around a glowing firefly. Sometimes the greatest adventures come disguised as misfortunes, she said. We just have to be brave enough to see them through. As Hope reached them, her face alight with wonder, Emily and Daniel enveloped her in a hug. In that moment, surrounded by the love of her family, Emily knew that all the mysteries, all the dangers, all the challenges they had faced had led them to this, a life full of love, hope, and the promise of new adventures to come. And as the sun set on another day in their new life, Emily and Daniel knew that the greatest mystery of all, the mystery of love, of family, of finding home in each other, was one they would gladly spend the rest of their lives exploring.